Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to FDG-TV, which is officially the best games academic conference nightly talk show that you can sit and watch in your pajamas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, as long as you're part of FDG. And even if you're not, if you're just here to come and check it out, welcome. And once again, we're hoping to have another cracking evening of FDG-TV. I am your host, Tommy Thompson. I am the workshop chair for FDG 2020, which is just my way of trying to say I have a modicum of professionalism when it comes to approaching this particular event. Not just that they dragged me in for this particular circus that we're going to be running every evening for the rest of the week. So if you're just tuning in for the first time, and you're not sure what's happening, FDG-TV, this is our nightly talk show tied to the Foundation of Digital Games conference. What we're doing is we're recapping the events of the day. We're bringing on guests to tell us a little bit about some of their work. We've got a couple of interesting guests tonight, both in terms of research published, but also we actually have one of our keynote speakers in with us this evening. And also we're just trying to foster a sense of community, because right now, FDG should be taking place in Malta and we're not doing it in Malta. We're in our respective bedrooms or our workspaces or whatever else. And now that I've got you thinking about pajamas, the thing that's going to be bugging you for the rest of the evening is, am I actually wearing trousers? Because I know at least half of you are not. And we did ask the guests to try and put on some trousers, but I can't promise anything. So I think it's really important for myself and everyone else involved that I just don't get up out of my chair for the rest of the evening. And yeah, I know that a whole bunch of you are really jazzed because there's an announcement, I think, for the PlayStation 5's got some stream this evening. They're talking about how much that plastic box is going to cost, which, sure, it's another plastic box. It plays video games. You maybe afford it. You maybe can't. What's the matter? What it isn't doing is bringing really interesting researchers together to talk about really cool things that are happening at the FDG conference. So, you know what? You can find out how much the PS5 is going to rob you tomorrow, but right now you want to be here for the sweet stuff. And we've had a really great day, actually, at FDG. We've had lots of great talks. We've had lots of great tracks happening. We've got a couple of our correspondents coming in to talk about some of the tracks and panels that we've had. And we've also had two really good keynotes. First of all, we had Tom Betts talking about procedural content generation as art, design and play. And we also had Sahara Sadi, who is an AI research lead over at King, the makers of Candy Crush, talking about AI and content production automation. Fantastic talks, really excited to talk about them. So we've got a little bit of a procedural content generation and kind of game AI spin on this evening. And so we thought it'd be appropriate to bring in someone who is very well versed in this space as a co-host. You might have noticed that, Mike didn't come back. And what happened was we reached out to our focus groups and they decided, well, he's not really FDG material, which is a shame because he's probably the more qualified and respectable out of the two of us. And for some reason, I'm just lumped with this. But anywho, I think at this point it's probably appropriate that we bring in my co-host for the evening because we've got a lot to do on the show tonight. So please give a warm welcome and an appropriate number of honks. That's right, I did listen to what people said in the chat. We have honks for tonight, which is really great. My co-host is an associate professor at New York University, is the co-director of the NYU Game Innovation Lab, and also the co-founder of Model AI. Please welcome Julian Togelius. An appropriate applause, of course. Hang on, I forgot to press the applause button. There we go.
Should I applaud?
I mean, don't applaud for yourself. It's a little bit,
Yeah, I already blew it.
It's a touch egregious.
Can we rewind? Can we rewind?
Which bit? Well, without you, I mean, I can do that. No one will hear you now.
Like February or something.
Oh, right, rewind to February. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. Something like that. Or maybe 2016, 2015, something like this. And anyway, this is, speaking of time travel, this is me, Julian, joining you live from the Starship Enterprise, which is a great place for quarantine during pandemic, the best place.
I mean, the number of cases are going to be quite limited. There's only so many people you interact with, I take it.
Yeah. I mean, the rest were like red shirts and they were taken by, the Klingons and stuff. So what can you do? So,
they all succumbed to the COVID very early, sadly.
Yeah, I actually sort of joining you from New York City, which is okay, from pandemic standpoint, but sucked before. Hey, so PCG and stuff. This sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might know a thing or two about it. from what I've been told.
Yeah. It's it's all made up.
I still remember. I mean, I've told you this story before, but I remember very fondly one of my students referred to you as the godfather of PCG in a paper that they wrote in class, and I'm not going to name the student because I think it's a bit unfair to them, because I did chuckle a little bit, and I think the first thing I did was I messaged you like, "Hey, look at this." One of my students said this.
I like that I'm the godfather. It implies that there's some kind of mafia-like organization behind it, which I would take pains to assure there is not. There is no mafia-like organization controlling PCG research. Nope. But anyway, I might have an offer you can't refuse. So that's.
I did think a little bit that it does have something. There's some sliver of truth to it as well, because if you think about it, so much of research when you hit a certain stage of your career is by delegation, and so really you're at this point where you're not doing any of the dirty work yourself, but you've got.
You never touch the work.
You don't touch the work. That's it. I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing? We're not going there. We're not going, because we've probably got some Italian guests as part of our conference this week, are just like, guys, just don't go there. Don't do it. One of the things that we probably should quickly mention, given I know you're involved in it, is that the generative design in Minecraft competition, which I believe the results of are going to be announced tomorrow.
This is going to be exciting.
Yes,
because actually, this year, it really looks good. Like the stuff that generators come out with are actually really good. And
yes.
This is cool.
I don't know if you saw, but I was one of the judges again this year, and I did like a whole bunch of live streams over on AI and Games, and there was a recurring gag of me getting really surprised and kind of blown away by each new generator. The kind of moment.
And not like blown away as happens.
Not physically.
Because
certainly like in a scholarly fashion, scholarly blown away. I'm doing it again, aren't I? And so, like, I thought they were absolutely fantastic. So one of the things that your colleague, Christoph, has done is that he's prepared a special version of the Discord of the Minecraft server, which is hosting a map that includes every settlement generator of 2020, which allows anyone who's part of the conference, you can walk around, you can explore, you can even build on some of it if you want. So by all means, if you're interested, do go and check it out over in I think it's in the general social area of the FDG Discord server. We've got all the details to where that server is, how you connect to it. I didn't really want to have to shout out an IP address and a port number live on YouTube. Particularly if
it's sort of a downer, you sort of IP is, and sort of make people
128. But also like the other thing, is this server running? I don't know. Is it running like out of NYU, or is it just out of Christoph's bedroom, and then suddenly like his internet's getting flooded?
It is. We've had it running at NYU for quite a while, but I'm not sure about Christoph's. We could ask Christoph, my colleague, friend, body double, all kinds of things, it's the rumors that we look exactly the same are, I would say,
this actually really begins to tie back into that Godfather theory as well, because then you've got this body double to go around in case something bad happens. Yeah. It's like,
and do hit jobs on bad papers and stuff.
Yeah, like reviewer 2 is really out to get you, sort of thing, and which is a very real problem. I mean, I don't really have to. I mean, personally, I don't really worry about that now, because now the internet is my reviewer 2, which is.
It's like the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw, I gave a talk about this at the UX of AI workshop on Friday, and I'm like, I spend 10 minutes every day of my life reading internet comments and blocking the most heinous ones so the rest of my audience can really enjoy having a nice, friendly, as friendly as the internet can be, of course. Yeah, man, some people have got beef, and I just don't understand it. It's like, is this all you've got to worry about, is shouting Anyway,
some people shouldn't be on the internet. The problem is they're on the internet because there's someone else that shouldn't be.
There's too many people on the internet.
It's a whole sort of, yes, too many people. I mean, internet was good when it was like 100 people, but I wasn't there, so I don't know. So I don't know. It was probably bad even then.
Oh, actually, we've actually had some answers to our earlier GDMC musings in the chat. Christoph has confirmed that the server is running at NYU, so we're not running the risk of crippling him and his housemates' bandwidth to sit and watch Netflix or whatever else they're going to do.
Please do cripple NYU's bandwidth. That's like, I'm asking you.
We'll find ways to do it. I just don't really want to kind of harness the power of the internet on him. I think that'd be a little bit unfair. Yeah. I can already see... We can already see in the corner of my eye right now. So one of the things that everyone else doesn't see is that we actually have a separate chat prepared for production purposes. And so Antonius, who we had on as a correspondent last night, he's kind of overseeing it, and I can actually see him typing. He stopped typing, and he's going to start typing again in a minute. And this will be him.
Like, get on with it.
Hurry up!
Hurry up! Hurry up! Yeah, exactly. We got like,
he just said it. He just said, "Stop offending our internet audience and get to our first correspondent." Okay, fine. So let me go and get ready, and we can welcome our first correspondent. Here we go. So yes, we've got Julian on board, and as some of you have already pointed out in the comments, if it's just the two of us, we could quite easily do this for an hour and a half. I think it's certainly quite plausible. Julian and I haven't actually spoken to each other that much since, I think it was December last year. We saw one another at an event, and one of the things is that when that's happening, is one of the things I'm finding really interesting about FDG right now is that I'm only spotting whether other people are at the conference if I see them appearing in like their thumbnail somewhere in the conference group of people, all the speakers, while I'm in the middle of kind of engaging with what the speaker is talking or whatever else. Because otherwise, usually you're so used to going, oh, there's somebody I know, they've snuck into the back of the conference. Now you're just looking for thumbnails. You're just looking for thumbnails and you're just trying to figure it out. Anyhow, now that I've managed to successfully just drag that on for long enough, let's get on to our first correspondent. Really excited to bring on board senior lecturer from Södertörns University in Stockholm. I think I've pretty much butchered pronunciation of that. Panelist as part of the Games as Story Generators event that we had today at FDG, as well as one of the co-organisers of the workshop on user experience of artificial intelligence in games that ran on Friday. Please give a warm welcome to our correspondent, Mirjam Eladhari. And there we go. Hey, and also you didn't hear this, but we actually had a proper Mario invite for you. How's it going?
Hey Mirjam, hur är läget?
Jo,
That's it. There we go. I can just step out now. It's great.
Jag tycker det ska låta Tommy få vara med. Jag vet inte.
Talk among yourselves.
Tommy, come back. Everything is forgiven. Everything is forgiven.
Thanks for having me.
So nice to see you, albeit remotely. So not used to seeing everyone in this kind of horrible digital format, but it's great. It's great. How's your FDG been? Things going well so far?
Very good. Really good. We today we had a panel called Games as Story Generators, and it was Matthew Gustial, me, Max Kreminski, Anne Sullivan, and Antonius, and also lots and lots of really good chat interactions going on during the panel.
That was a lot of fun. It was insightful as well. I mean, that's more academically sort of proper thing to say. It was insightful and had contained knowledge and stuff, but it was also a lot of fun, right? This panel.
Okay, do you remember anything, Julian, from it?
As much as I remember from things, yes. There was a lot of discussion about, for example, baseball.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that was quite interesting was that we started to look at esports and zero-sum games as story generators. I mean, normally when you look at story generators, you look at deep drama and theatrical things like that. But we had lots of discussions about how esports and football and voiceovers from chess and first-person shooters and sports actually create a kind of layer of narrative on top of quite mechanical gameplay, which was really interesting.
So it's not just about the story that's emerging within the game itself, but then this extra narrative layer that's coming, and particularly in esports, that's really exciting because you'll have players that are going through a bad season or what have you, and they're maybe coming out, and this is like their comeback moment, or the Thompson, the kind of the big turns in any major game. I don't know how much yourself, how much esports you watch. I don't watch a huge amount, but I've watched a few games, and it's really exciting to see, maybe it's a 5-game match, and maybe a team starts really bad at the end, and then they're pulling it back, or it's the other way around, or something like that, and just how watching that play out and watching how the audience really reacts to that as well is probably more of the exciting part, I think. And I think it helps a lot of people connect, I guess, with it. Because if they don't know the nuances of the game itself.
Definitely. And that's also something that we talked about after. Like one thing which is so significant for a successful generative narrative, that's the audience reactions and how you as an audience react to it. Mm-hmm. The thing is though, that how do you measure and track those reactions? Like if someone scores a goal and everyone like screams, well, then you can track that screaming in the Twitch streams. You can see like very animated audio. You can hear the pitch of the voice. But if you're super engaged in something, you don't always see that reaction. That's not always trackable. So that's also something that we talked about, like different types of generated stories and how they are generated. Like we kind of looked at 3 different ways of doing it, like where one is very agent-centered, looking at how the deep personality of characters are kind of replayed and how you engage with it, companion AIs and stuff like that. The other thing is like systems that comes out of Facade, Prom Week, Ensemble, and now V-Space, where you instead look at what's going on between the characters. Is the relationships between characters that holds the important data. So that's kind of like one. And then we have the third one, which is more like the epic one, where you put the important story bits into objects and artifacts and how you can create persistence in that, like the type of work that Victor Gustafsson is doing, which is kind of representative for that like third type of computation that you do to generate drama, like at the system level of what's generating it.
Yeah.
Then looking at the audience reaction and how you track that and how you kind of look at the fourth layer of narratives, that again is another complex thing. So it's like there's so much to talk about. And, you know, we had an hour. An hour is a lot. And we said a lot of things, but it's like we could have talked for days. We had so much
about, like, you know, building a narrative. So games is a narrative generator, and obviously we make the obvious comparison to sports. You know, sports are fantastic narrative generators, or people spin narratives on top of them. So who is authoring a narrative if the game is a narrative generator? I mean, one idea is that it's all based on audience reactions and so on, and you sort of foreground more of what the audience responds well to. But isn't there a notion of someone being the author of this as well?
You've done such a good job that Mirjam just gave up.
That depends, like, on how you see it. Like, do you see it like, if you're on the base level, is the engine that is basically the author, and how you kind of create the kind of like system building up the world, carrying the world. It could also be like on the narrative design level, where you have
players you're talking about. No, well, players are on the top.
Oh no, this is more like the narrative designers that create like the Baba Yaga or the cat or whatever that is in there, and bases that on like how the world universe is built up. Then, of course, you have the players like swimming around in this world and interacting with all these objects, like in the now of the playing. But then again, we have all this other stuff, like where we generate all the stories, like coming from all that, like not in the now of the playing, but kind of a layer above that.
Is that the commentators?
Say again?
Is that the commentators? Like people who watch it and comment?
Exactly. This is the Twitch stream.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, or the fan fiction, or all that. So, like, you can say, like, simplify, there's like 4 layers of authors here.
I love that you just had this painting ready to express this point for us. It's like, right, I know exactly the piece of art I've got to really kind of hammer home my point here. I'm just sitting here kind of blown away.
This should be an illustration.
Yeah, I had it close to the computer and I brought it here for your enjoyment.
Very good.
But yes, the chat is loving it.
levels of like authors, as you asked, Julian.
Tack så mycket.
I am appropriately humbled. Yes, and my face is just like completely like, that's just a Discworld painting that's just ready to bring out at a moment's notice. It's like, right, so here's the game and everything. And you just had this whole analogy like just ready to go. Like, I thought I was good at analogies. This is expert craftsmanship. I've just been floored. But yeah, sounds like absolutely like I need to go and check out that panel at some point. I missed it. So I'm missing a lot of stuff. It's so difficult to try and keep up with everything. And yes, Matthew Gusdell says I stepped away and Mirjam is showing paintings. That's right. Every evening here on FDG-TV, we've got something special. But yeah, definitely I'm going to have to go and check that out. We're going to have to move on, I think, to get our next correspondent on. But Mirjam, so lovely to see you. Thank you so much for this wonderful overview. And by all means, I think everyone's going to have to go and check out that panel recording afterwards.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
See you soon. Oh, right. Hey, I'm just floored by that. I don't know about you. It's all right. Julian's now shouting in my ear, but nobody can see him or hear him except for the people that are in the chat, but that's fine. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think it's been a really, really nice kind of overview of what that panel's all about. And I'd actually looked at Mike Cook. I think he'd put a Twitter thread out earlier kind of summarizing an awful lot of it. So it was really great to then hear so much more about it. I'm just currently watching what's happening on the other side, and so it looks like we've got our other correspondent in as well. All right, excellent. At which point I should probably do the appropriate introduction. So, track chair for game technology, who is joining us for this particular correspondent overview, senior lecturer at De Montfort University, that's in Sheffield in the United Kingdom. Please welcome Jethro Shell. There we go.
Just a quick correction. We're not in Sheffield, we're in Leicester.
So you are. I should know this. I've been there.
Visited, yeah, you visited. So,
I've visited you. I've spoke there, and yeah, I still don't even remember where it is. I have no context of. That's what it is. You know what it is? It's because we haven't been anywhere. I've been in my house for the last 6 months, and that's it. I've completely forgot it.
Locations don't exist anymore.
I mean, if it's any consolation, I also got the town that my mum lives in wrong during my wedding toast last year. So there we go.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Anyway, how you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah, all right. You know, trying to cope with the madness, but aside from that, busy trying to cope with rejiggling work stuff in terms of the university, sort of differing learning approaches and all that sort of business. But yeah, busy.
I'm quite enjoying that you're taking a much more kind of abstract, distant approach to everything. You're really, distancing yourself from the situation right now, just kind of hovering just hovering above the earth. Like, I imagine that Julian can probably see you at somewhere from his front deck, like looking out the window.
Yeah, it's pretty great. We're both in space, which is the place to be now with sort of the pandemic. No one lives in a place. Everybody's just in time zone. Physical space has lost all meaning. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I feel bad now that I'm just still sitting here in my study. Just like it's quite depressing now by comparison.
It's very sort of, embodied and real. So yeah.
Oh, you just mean there's stuff everywhere. Is that what you mean? I've done this really great job that everything that's just outside of camera view is like littered with stuff. So it looks like I've got this really kind of clean and organized space, but then ultimately it's an absolute nightmare. But anyway, getting back onto point. So Jethro, you're the track chair for the game technology track.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what's been happening at the track. Like, what was your aspirations for the track this year, and tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that we're already seeing and still to see, I think, throughout the conference.
I guess it was to see kind of that overarching view of where the technologies that are emerging and really kind of engaging with gaming in terms of the industry as well as kind of academia. So sort of production of kind of toolkits, software, that kind of element that's going to interact. So that was what we wanted to see, and that's what we did see as well. Yeah, in terms of kind of highlight for it was Dialogic, which was about sort of dynamic conversational generation of language, which I thought was really interesting and something we'll probably see a bit more of. I know people looked a lot into kind of language generation, but it's sort of been a difficult problem to solve, I think. And apparently it's already out there in some games. So I went and downloaded one of those to see what it was like. That was fun. It's like a kind of Tamagotchi thing. So yeah, a suitable cultural reference there. So, you know, for all those younger viewers out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Is one of these things you might actually, when you lecture, maybe your audience don't even know about it. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah, I have many of those. They just stare at me where it's like, okay, so truly, how old are you?
That I used to do a thing. I haven't done it this year, actually. I need to do it. I always do a list before the start of every teaching year of all the games that are now older than your freshman students. And I haven't done it this year because last year I did it. I got so much hate mail on Twitter afterwards. Like, Tommy, why are you doing this to us? I'm like, oh yeah, like Halo, the original Halo is now older than your freshman students and people are just dying in their chairs. And I thought, probably right now with the way the world is going, if I then turn around and tell you all these other games are now older than your students, I don't think that's fair to the rest of the world at this point in time.
No, we got to hold on to something. So what else is like interesting stuff you saw? Were there any trends you saw in the game technology track?
Not especially. I think, as I say, it was quite diverse in that way. I suppose a lot of kind of coming through from some of the AI side, it was generative. I think when we live in this world of open games, open worlds, it's that sort of generation of content is really, and community-based, a little bit of community-based coming thing, but it was that generation of content, I think, which is probably driving things through. I don't know whether you guys think that of a lot of what we've seen across the conference.
I might be biased, but yes, obviously. I mean, it's been the theme that is like generative methods for everything is, you know, eating all of games. And it's almost sometimes you weirdly feel that games are sort of behind when you see generative methods being used, you know, wide front in music production, in the TV production, movies, and so on. It's like, you know, well, even though it comes from games partly. So
yeah. So that was, I think that was a part of that, definitely. Kind of cropped up a bit of VR, which is kind of, that's a lot of what I do at the moment, which is, I think some people are waiting for that, maybe whether it disappears, like, I know, 3D TVs or something. So so that was interesting. But thinking about actually how you interact, how you navigate within those worlds is again part of it. So we moved in perhaps away from that first production of VR, kind of 1.0, and moving further away from that. And further away, perhaps, from just talking about the tech, like as in the physical, and thinking about how you interact with it. So rather than just being, oh, this is a bit of fun, this is how actually we utilize it in a gaming sense. So yeah, there's been a discussion about that. So that was cool as well.
Awesome. Sounds like it's been a lot of fun then. Definitely a lot of interesting talks and kind of topics to cover. What have you?
Yeah, I know.
I did manage to catch a bit of it, but I think earlier today, but I'm going to have to go back in at some point and listen to the rest.
Yeah, I think I've from a personal point of view, kind of going through, listened to as many tracks as I was able to, but got to make some choices. It's very inspirational. I found it sort of one of the most enjoyable conferences I've been to, despite me being sat in my house and not being able to go to Malta and enjoy sun and wine and
avoiding any additional work. I think that's the other critical part, definitely.
Yeah, having a week away or more just to say, I can't, I'm at a conference.
No, now we're doing twice as much work in half the time and everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll end this on a happy note. Jethro, it's always great to see you. I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of your time at the conference, and I hope you and yours are all safe, well, and happy. And we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
All
See
right.
you later.
Thank you very much, Jethro. The appropriate honk. There we go. And some applause. And I think it's certainly interesting right now. I mean, this is certainly something I'm dealing with. I'm not sure how the rest of you are. So I work part-time in academia these days. I've kind of moved out from full-time for a couple of years now. And then one of the big problems I'm having is that I'm working with for the university on some stuff, and then like you're hoping to try and really key into the conference, but all this additional work's coming in, and so you don't have that luxury of saying, I'm halfway around the world, I don't have time for this right now, I'll deal with this next week. Instead, you're kind of juggling all these things at once, and it means that afterwards I'm just going to have to find the time to sit and watch an awful lot of the recordings. But of course, that means finding time, which I already heard a whole bunch of you laugh merely at the notion of this as soon as I brought it up. Apparently the honks and applause aren't happening on the audience end. That's very disappointing. You know what it is? It might be because I don't... Oh, you know what it is? I know exactly what it is. We'll get the honks going in a minute. I like it. This means I just looked like a crazed person a minute ago as I'm kind of looking around like this. Anyway, let's actually get to our first of two guests this evening. So if you've been tuning into the conference already, we've got our one of our keynote speakers for this year joining us, independent game developer, a developer of Sir, You Are Being Hunted, The Signal from Tolva, and The Light Keeps Us Safe. Please give a warm welcome to Tom Betts, everyone. Right.
Hello.
We now got to check.
Working. Can you hear me?
I think it's working. I think I can hear you. I think the honks worked as well. So we'll make sure we give you the appropriate welcome jingle as well, which is just playing over all of this right now. This is a production note for tomorrow. I need to make sure that the noises still play when I'm in a single panel by myself. Anyway, good to see you.
Hello.
Hello. Everyone. How's it going?
Yeah, not bad. I've got to be careful actually, because I've got you on in a YouTube window, and you on in the Zoom window, and I've got the PlayStation conference on in another window. So it's all getting a bit complicated.
Oh.
So has anything major happened at the PlayStation conference? Because already we've had so many big, reveals tonight.
Wow.
I think.
Yeah,
in comparison.
there's going to be a new Call of Duty game. If you didn't already,
No.
I know. Can you believe it? Yeah, and I've heard there's going to be a new Resident Evil game.
No.
Again, yeah. And I'm pretty sure there'll be a FIFA game as well. That's my bet.
Sure.
Another FIFA, another Madden. Special thanks to Jim Whitehead, who's confirmed that the honks honk, which is definitely not the interaction I wanted to have with Jim during FDG. But yes, I can now confirm that the honking is working. So how are you feeling now that you've because of course you've got one of the keynotes to give, so you're feeling a bit more relaxed now? You can maybe kind of tune in and enjoy more of the conference without worrying about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching. It's been really good for me because, like, normally I can't time out to kind of go to like a multiple day conference. So even though I'm sure it's a bit of a downer for a lot of people, but for me, I've been able to actually check out a lot more of the papers and the panels than I would have ever been able to in real life. And so I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.
And certainly your keynote went down very well. Like I noticed that you had questions in the chat and Zoom at the time, but then also that kind of bled over into Discord, which I'm pretty sure you were still answering about like an hour or 2 hours before we jumped on tonight.
Yeah, I tried to. Well, I'm not sure I was giving the right answers, but...
So that was a great keynote, and lots of interesting work coming out of it. So I was very happy to see it. These are the kind of things you don't always get to read about in papers. So and you don't have time to play all of these games. These are games you sort of shop down and like, oh, would like to play this, but I got to play the fun. I'm too busy playing the latest Call of Duty and FIFA
on your PS5, of course.
Yeah, but something else. So that was really cool. So I wanted to sort of, I wanted to ask you first of all, like, do you agree that there's the most interesting stuff is happening these days in sort of, games research is procedural content generation? If we could do
yeah, I probably don't know enough about what's happening inside. I mean, listening to this conference today, there's been a bunch of things that I've been really excited by that I didn't really know about.
Yeah.
And I think that I've been sort of loosely connected with the academic sphere for a while. I was just saying to Mike that I remember seeing you do a talk at DIGRA in the Netherlands like years ago about something self-driving cars, things you were evolving.
Oh, that
like
is going back. I
Yeah,
remember.
it's a long time ago.
Well, yeah, they were reappropriated for like a completely different purpose. It's all to do with Kant and the categorical imperative.
That's right. Yeah. I remember. I saw you present that paper, and so I've been sort of in and out of the academic sphere for like years, but I'm not like totally connected with it, so I couldn't really say exactly everything that's going on in it.
But you know, is any of this academic stuff good? You know?
Well, I know some of it is really good. Yeah, I mean, I think often the difference between we sort of use the same things. We just use different words to talk about it. So, you know, when someone says something like, you know, what heuristics do I use to evaluate my process? My answer will be like, I look at it. And if it looks good, then it's okay. So, you know, I think there's a lot of shared stuff. It's just the framework, the sort of surrounding frameworks are different. And I think that, I mean, I've talked to people about this before, but I think it's a shame that the academic sphere and the kind of like practice sphere don't interact more, because there's so much stuff in common. There's so much really interesting stuff that could kind of exchange. It seems a bit of a shame sometimes that like the language barrier or the kind of academic journal system sort of keeps them apart.
Yeah, and we also tend to just not be in the same places, you know.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
As well, yeah.
I found it really interesting as well because we had your keynote today, but also we had Sahar Asadi come on talking about the work happening at King, and both of them are kind of addressing this thing of this challenge of taking these theorems or processes that we would use for procedural generation and then building that into an actual commercial product. And you actually spoke about this a couple of times in your talk, like the things that you toy with as like side projects versus the reality of I need to ship something. And it's something I've experienced to a much smaller degree. I've worked a little bit on some projects. Some of them I can't even still talk about yet. But one of the interesting things that we were dealing with was procedural generation and this notion of I want to build this range of diversity and be able to surprise ourselves still as the designers and creators of this game. But it has to maintain certain functional rules and kind of elements of the aesthetic that we want, but still find ways to surprise us. And certainly your talk, that was something that really resonated with me, is how do you bring all these things together in a way that it doesn't feel like any of them are being compromised too heavily?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, and I don't think there is like any one way of doing it. A lot of it just comes down to practice and experience, and like, you know, actually play testing things with humans, and because there's only so much you can kind of unit test things like algorithmically. You have to eventually kind of rely on real people to kind of look over things. One thing I didn't say today that I was going to say. Yeah. So, you know, who's the guy who made Brogue? Do you know, is it Brian? I can't remember the second name. No? Not Michael Brogue, no, the game Brogue. It's like the NetHack clone.
I don't know. Someone in the chat will no doubt confirm it for us in a moment.
I watched the talk that he said, and it is sort of is relevant to this idea of like making sure you maintain balance and things. And he basically said, don't bother. He was like, I've got a system in my game where I can have a sword that appears that will kill dragons in one hit. And he's like, and you would consider that to be completely imbalanced. It's like totally wrong. However, it makes people's experiences of the game like really fun and unique, because every now and again, it only happens so infrequently that it kind of doesn't matter. Someone will have a run where they'll find this thing, and it just means they can insta-kill all these creatures that otherwise would have destroyed them. But it's okay because there's enough other stuff in the game that they might trip up on and get destroyed by, that level of imbalance when a specific sub kind of area is actually fine. And I thought that was really interesting.
That's also really interesting as well, because when you tie that into the game as a story generator, like literally what Mirjam was just talking with us about like 10 minutes ago, like that becomes an interesting story. Like actually the level generator becomes, or what the artifacts it's creating, and that creates a unique story in that context of the player might remember that as well. Like, oh, I got this amazing sword, and then I was off like chopping through all these monsters. And then either they win or they don't, and it goes horribly wrong, and then it becomes this really interesting tale of hubris, perhaps, or they just become really, really happy with how the system's aligned with them in that one particular situation.
Yeah, So I think that we worry, well, maybe we don't, but I think sometimes we worry too much about balancing things really well. I think that if you balance something too much, you kind of balance all the fun out of it, which is almost like a contradiction if what you're trying to do. But
isn't this is very much depending on what kind of game you're making. I mean, for you, this is true, but for Sahar, talking about what she's doing in the context of King, where they're making a product that's been around for a number of years, and they plan to keep it around for many years more, you know, and it's a very different thing where this actually needs to be pretty properly balanced, right? And it's or maybe not.
I don't know. I mean, there's the other thing is that interesting when you look at the lifetime of a player over their like experience with a game, and this is something that came up to one of the papers, which was about generating maps for like RTS games. And what I find really interesting is when you look at stuff like that, is that like when a player first starts playing a game and they're inexperienced, the imbalance of things isn't as important, and it often gives them a kind of a better experience because it means that they might win because that particular game has created a situation which overpowers them, and they win and they enjoy that experience. But as they get more experience with the game, this is particularly true of like multiplayer games, they find like imbalance is more offensive to them because they want to be winning based on their own skill, which is a thing they've developed over time. So I think that it's not only does balance matter, but it also matters at different stages of players' experience with a project, you know, with a game system. You know, if you look at like kind of proper PvP games, like some of them, you know, are purely skill based, and some of them have random elements in it. And the ones that have random elements in them tend to appeal to the more newer players, and then they kind of want those elements of randomness removed as they get more experience because they want to feel like they win entirely on their own merits.
There's a long discussion about that in Characteristics of Games. Elias could share. Which is one of my favorite game design textbooks because it's so dry. It's so dry it catches. Get it. But
we did have a comment over in the chat for Brogue, Brian Walker.
That's right. Yeah.
There we go.
He's good. He's done some really good talks like the roguelike celebration and stuff like that.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks very much, Anne, for answering that. Also, Jim's had to head off, but he's really enjoying the broadcast. Thanks for doing it. An obligatory honk for Jim there, now that he's gone, probably. Sorry, I've completely derailed the conversation there because I wanted to make sure that I honked.
I actually have something I wanted to ask Tom about. I wanted to ask Tom about, like, or if we have time, Tom.
Yeah, we got time. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's great. So, also, Tommy, I still haven't started impersonating your Scottish accent, but it's going to come.
That's why we're on a very tight schedule. This is why Antonius is currently in the Discord, just like, get on with it, because he knows that sooner or later you're going to buckle.
This is going to get bad. Would this idea you have of having a game where the players not only play the game as taking actions in the game, but also rebuild or edit or control the generative system in some way? I think it's beautiful. Do you think this is something that could spread? Would there be like, a whole sort of, genre of games that are like this? Can you export this to other kind of types of games? Could it be something you do multiplayer and so on? I think it's really annoying that we don't really have any esports that are based on PCG, but there should be. But
yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, you could basically use it in any system where there are kind of human readable parameters, I think, for the generation algorithm.
Not the deep neural network.
Well, I think that's a bit different, basically. Like, I find those sorts of systems, not for me, when I'm producing games, I find them more problematic because at the minute they seem to be harder to direct towards exactly what I want. I think they probably will become really, really useful as time goes on. But for now, they seem to be quite a long investment, and I don't know. But I mean, I could imagine, when you get like multiplayer games, when people they have a phase in a lot of games where before you start the game, people can pick and ban various maps, and I don't see why you couldn't have that as like a generation algorithm where people are picking and banning different parameters. People actually, you get one team gets, you both. You could spend those points on like increasing the parameter value of X or decreasing the parameter value of Y.
So you basically have a market where you sort of buy or ban different parts of the generator system, and then you get a sequence of map or like an unrolling world that sort of, fits with what you
and if you're a player who's really comfortable with a kind of really map, then you do like putting your points into, the kind of that element of PCG. Whereas if you're a player that prefers like a different style of structural construction, then you might put your points into those parameters.
Like, that sounds amazing, both in the context of like roguelikes, I guess, because then you could have that single player experience, but actually bringing it into an esports environment where the level is going to be procedurally generated for this like first person shooter match, but you're actually then bidding on different things that you want to appear, like actual qualities you want to appear in the map, and that's going to influence tactic. Like, that sounds amazing to me if someone could actually pull that off.
I mean, you could just have like, I know my team have got some really good snipers, so we want to generate an area with loads of sight lines in it. So we're going to put in these parameters. You could all have all kinds of different considerations. It'd be great.
That actually would be great. Someone should build this.
We've just gave away a really good idea live on the internet, and someone could.
Yeah. Because there's like, of course, the idea is the whole thing, right? Actually building the game is easy, I heard.
You just flick a switch in Unity. I don't know if you've tried it, Julian. It just,
yes. You get the game, and
like, and then you just, multiplayer, you snap your fingers. It just works. It's in.
You gotta get it sorted.
He says, staring at his dev kits in front of him, where the games aren't running on the hardware correctly right now.
It's being in academia. It's like, it's so easy to sort of not have the healthy dose of respect for like, the complexities of actually building things. We get like hybrid beings like Tommy, who like, is some sort of has like many legs.
Call me a hybrid being?
Yes, that's
I think that is the nicest thing you've ever called me, I think, on record. And the internet heard it as well.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm compromised. But it's like as one leg in academia, one leg in sort of, whatever kind of like ego broadcasting is doing, sort of public engagement with science, and the one leg in game development, which is very cool. I mean, I don't ship anything, so that's
you publish though.
Yeah,
but I mean,
but shipping it is, comparatively easy. You just like, this is like this sort of, attenuation process of like, fighting against reviewers and getting it through. But that's a different.
But equally, for someone who actually, I have to do this for my living. Like, I'm constantly jealous of you lot, because you get to like have an idea, and it doesn't matter really how crazy that idea is. You get to like investigate, and
sort of, yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to get funding for it, but then you sort of, you keep begging for funding with increasingly desperate arguments and some maths, and then sometimes with it, and it's like completely unknowable when you would get it. You usually also like pray to various like animals, or walk counterclockwise, carry candles, sing songs and stuff like that. So,
but I mean, also in theory, if you have like an academic premise and you investigate it and it doesn't work out, that's still okay.
Yeah.
That's actually a result. Whereas in games, making a game, if you do that and it doesn't work, that's it. No one's going to pay you for it.
I mean, some people ship games even though they don't quite.
Well, okay, that's true. But I hear it's frowned upon. So
yeah, no, but it shouldn't be, because some of my favorite sort of game interactive entertainment experiences are just like broken in some sense.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's still good, So
yeah.
Right. Sorry, we're gonna have to start wrapping this up, because I don't know if you guys could see the production chat screen right now.
I've got it turned off.
I am being yelled at by Mike Cook, which is something I never thought would ever happen. I believe that the Oscars playoff music has intensified. Which I think gives us an idea of where we are. But yeah, Tom, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I hope you've enjoyed, first of all, you're giving your keynote earlier today and kind of hanging out at the conference, and I hope you get to stick about for the rest of it.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
Thanks for coming. And now all bets are
off. Right, thank you very much, Tom, for coming in, and I'm going to scold Julian afterwards, I think, for that one. But yeah, I'm currently just removing my headphones temporarily because I'm really at risk of more puns coming in through the chat, courtesy of that. And also just because I'm suffering the significant ire of our production team right now, who are just so angry at us. Yeah, I've had a couple of comments point out that you can hear blooping noises. It might be you can hear the blooping when I'm trying to mute my own microphone, which defeats the purpose of having a button that mutes my own microphone. In fact, one of the things I'm going to quickly do, just to maintain my own sanity a little bit, is I'm going to turn off a thingy. If I can find it. I'm going to turn off a thingy. Yep, I see. I'm working on it, guys. I'm working on it. There we go. Everyone's just telling me, you know what, I'm just not going to do it. It's fine. It's all good. Anyway, so let's get on to our second guest before the production team lynch me live on the internet. So we have next up Associate Professor from the University of Miami. Let me actually make sure we have everything in place. Please give a warm welcome to Lindsay Grace. And of course, we'll give you the obligatory guest tune, which is massively loud and only the internet's going to hear it.
Thanks for having me.
Sorry we kept you waiting for so long. I'm going to blame it entirely on my co-host at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure the wee one would do that.
How's things so far? How are you enjoying your time at FDG?
Great. It's always invigorating. Yeah.
It's so that was a pretty cool paper. It's the best paper candidates one, right?
Yes, actually, just to quickly, for anyone who's not familiar, Lindsay's paper, Awkward Annie, Impacts of Playing on the Edge of Social Norms, by G. Tanner Jackson, Blair Lehman, and Lindsay Grace. Best paper nomination. You'll be able to find it in the proceedings here at the conference. But yeah, so Julian, sorry, I completely interrupted you there. You had a point.
No.
Oh, no. Okay, cool.
What do you want to sort of, I don't know, what's the kosher here, you know? Should we ask you to say like a few sentences about what it's about for if everyone watching this didn't catch this, or, you know, something like
Sure. I'm happy to answer that question. In short, think of it this way. We had a really specific research question that ETS wanted to create. Is essentially they do assessments that are typically done by one-on-one interviews, and they're asking people to answer a variety of questions that are actually about reading their ability to know what to say in a given social hierarchy. So it's about learning things like don't ask your boss to move you this weekend, or don't share your sex life with your coworker, that sort of stuff. And so instead of doing these sort of one-on-ones, we created this game called Awkward Annie. And we had one really big research question, which was, if people play in the positive or negative, basically if they're allowed to be as awkward as possible or required to abide by social norms, which is more entertaining and which is better at assessing their ability to actually choose the right words.
And one thing you found was that you were surprised by how many people chose to sort of just abide by the norms, not break them. And I'm also like, what? That's strange, you know, isn't games break?
Right. And this is actually one of the things, I totally went into this expecting that we were going to get a bunch of people who wanted to break the rules. The analogy I always use is it's often more fun in a driving game to run the red lights than to just drive with traffic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it was surprising to me that people liked it. But, you know, there are a couple of questions we could ask. And actually someone asked this during FDG in the Q&A section, which is part of the reason for that, because we didn't explicitly test gamers. So we didn't have people who self-identified as gamers. What we did was we opened up the research participants to anyone and got largely a group between 21 and 45. And 350 people played it. So we got a decent sized set, but ultimately they performed better, which we don't have a lot of control over. That's really up to them. But they also seemed to enjoy it equally. They didn't have a preference either way.
But I mean, if you take a random person under 45,
yep.
Aren't the chances that, you know, this person is going to be a gamer, right? Especially.
I guess is it the capital G gamer identity, I guess, versus the lowercase g of someone who just happens to play games, which is
sort of, you know.
And honestly, if you look at Yeah, but if you look at some of the more sort of social science research in this space, and you look at things like play preferences and play diaries, there's a whole set of players who actually really want to play to the game's goals, not defeat them. Like I'm one of the first people to play with the game and say, how do I break it? But there are loads of people who want to say, oh, I'm going on this ride you constructed, so let me be as effective as I can. And I'd say that maybe especially in spaces like casual games, you find a lot of those players.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I found really interesting as well, because like you said, that people like to actually stick to the rules in some regard and actually play quite nicely. One of the things that I was thinking about was kind of forbidden humor. Like, for example, Cards Against Humanity, where it's one of those circumstances where you create these really tight social spaces where people can really push bounds as far as they can, but within somewhat socially acceptable parameters. And so when you've got that kind of framework, like when I read the paper at first, my thought was people are going to really go into some dark places, or trying to be kind of unnecessarily or inappropriately funny, and then like they don't. And that really, like, I think that was what Julian said, that really took me by surprise, because I guess like 18-year-old Tommy would have done that, but 35 or 36, 37-year-old Tommy now wouldn't. And so, yeah, like that was the thing that really took me, because I guess, like, again, that's kind of what Julian's saying, is older gentlemen were thinking, oh, those kids, they're gonna make a mess of things, but they didn't. And I found...
But isn't it also like, the thing, if you play a game at home is one thing, but if you play a game, and Professor Lindsay Grace is telling you...
Right, yeah.
Then...
So we actually... Mechanical Turk, so they were probably playing at home. But I think one of the other interesting observations is the fact that when you play a game and you're playing it towards sort of negative, you're always a little worried that you're going to get kicked out. If I get too many violations in Grand Theft Auto, my game ends. So that flirting with disaster may have also created a new tension for our players, because they knew that if they'd stepped over the line, the study might be over and they don't get to play anymore. But again, the most interesting thing is if you basically did the mean of all of the player scores, the people who are playing appropriately got about a 94% on this test, and the others got an 84%. And I actually suspect, and we do more research in this space, that part of the reason that the people who underperformed because they were playing the awkward Annie, not the appropriate Annie, may have been doing that because they were so nervous about crossing that edge where we just kick them out of the room and say, I'm sorry, you can't play this anymore, you've been too awful.
And I guess it is that social construct as well, because then they're like, oh no, because then like my professor's going to know that I did this in this one time, and it's this point of shame that's then going to hang over their head forevermore. Maybe you forget about it or whatever else, but then they become very conscious of it, like any further interaction that they maybe have with you.
Or the discomfort, right? We ask for people to basically troll our game, and then at some point they're uncomfortable with themselves.
I mean,
yeah.
Julian, there you go.
No, I mean, that's just maybe also the feeling that, they know they're part of a study, so they expect you to be second guessing them somehow. Oh, I could break this rule here, but they probably expect me to. So,
Right, yeah.
Maybe I'm reading too much in here. That's like, another level of gamer here, but...
But it also actually kind of slightly ties into Mirjam's story generation notion from earlier on. This idea that there's actually this kind of meta narrative that's now been established over the top of this whole experience as people are playing it, as they're building their own conceptualization of what's happening both inside the game and outside the game, and that becomes their narrative through that whole thing, that's really fascinating.
Paper actually from, I guess it was about a year ago, that's more of an artistic perspective, design perspective, but it's explicitly about the idea that every gameplay experience we have is haunted by the last. So it takes this Derrida's perspective, Spectres of Marx, and applies it to level design, where you're thinking consciously of the fact that every current level you're designing and experiencing is actually affected by your past ones. And so you're always reading it from that lens, not a fresh lens, as sometimes people perceive it.
Suddenly Dark Souls makes an awful lot more sense to me.
Well, this is interesting because I guess this applies both within a game that you keep playing, like, those other games that you sort of have played before. I guess, there's no way to control for that in a study like this, but yeah.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, the thing that's kind of sitting on my mind then is, is there a way to take some of the lessons out of this to help us design better games, particularly as we're trying to improve or increase the range of interaction mechanisms that we have between players, but also just toxicity is always a perennial problem. Is there ways that we could actually adopt any of this into a game? Have you had any thoughts on how that could happen?
So I think in part, that's what this is hinting at. This is hinting at this opportunity, particularly when you're assessing that you actually want to go towards the norm. And I think one of the best ways to think about it practically is when you're designing, say, a tutorial level to introduce people to a set of new mechanics. Well, it might be tempting to say, demonstrate that you know those mechanics by doing all the wrong things. We know it sort of instinctively that's the wrong way to approach it, right? Instead, what we should be doing is saying, good job, here's a new challenge. And so I think our game, you're keeping in mind that this was a game that was completed in 20 minutes or so on average for each player. That section of it helped performance by being affirmative. But let's be honest, a gamer puts in many more hours. And if we did continue to research, we might find that there is a kind of like the uncanny valley, a point at which we drop back down and the better performance comes from breaking the system because they know the system. In our game, for example, we just, they had 20 minutes, they learned this, they were happy to do it that way. But if we'd given them 4 hours of this experience, they may have by hour 2 said, oh my gosh, I'm more engaged and I'm doing better because I know how to break it. It's kind of like when you first drive a car, you don't go, how can I run this into a wall? You go, how do I stay on the road? My hobby is car racing, so every analogy is always the car.
But then in turn, you end up becoming well, the driving analogy is quite interesting because there's the potential that you become a very good driver and a good citizen of the road, if you will, versus you end up just becoming an absolute nightmare and then ultimately end up crashing that car into a wall at some point.
Right.
And
losing your privilege to play with cars.
Never thought about it like that. But
I'm in the process of getting a driver's license right now at the mature age of 41, and I'm learning to drive on the streets of Manhattan. So I can relate to a lot of these things. It's basically, you start out trying to follow the rules, and then there's an intense social pressure to not do that. It's
a couple of people are honking behind you, telling you to take that right on red. You're not supposed to.
I guess you also want to kind of move away from that idea, and I guess this also applies in the context of games. You want to move away from the idea that it's the social pressure to do good, and actually just let's just be a good citizen within this space. And I think one of the bigger problems, particularly with games, is that there's very little consequence, I guess, a lot of the time for that sort of thing. So if you do get free reign, your natural inclination is to go out and the Grand Theft Auto analogy. The first thing you do is you beat someone up, you steal their car, you crash it into a lamppost or whatever else, because it doesn't feel like there's consequence within the system. No. It's just, we'll restart at a checkpoint. I wonder if there's a way. I mean, do you have any thoughts on how that could maybe, like what we're discussing, particularly in your research here, like to encourage that better behavior, to kind of find ways to reward it rather than enforce it?
Yeah, I actually think there are. I mean, one of the obvious solutions is in our original version of the game, we explicitly were trying to drive people towards the worst choice. And that was our means for assessing. And I think that you could do the same in other contexts. So for example, to demonstrate that you know how to manage your inventory in a first-person shooter, you start, let's see if you really know what you should be using, you're gonna give yourself the hardest challenge first. It's like, choose the weapon that is the least appropriate for this context. 40 people in front of you and you choose a sniper rifle and say, I got this. Then we really know, you know what you're doing, right? And so I think that's the space that we have to get comfortable with. I think there are a lot of, this is why I mentioned that other piece that I did years ago. There are a lot of old references that are affecting our behavior. I mentioned, for example, that when I played GTA, often all the way back to like Vice City, I was always trying to hit that border where I wouldn't get kicked out of the game and I wouldn't have so many police. I can't do anything anymore, but I wanted to get as close as possible. And I write often in my latest book, Social Impact, Doing Things for Games, Social Impact Through Play, I explicitly talk about part of the benefit of play is playing with borders. And it's a really educational moment. The definition of play is that it's a safe space. And it's when we hit the edge of the safe space that we understand the edge of play. So it seems really, I think it's really essential in good fundamental design to afford players those abilities just so they understand when they've crossed the line. And then they know the play space.
You're sort of auto-balancing the game in terms of transgression. Because that's also like the number of police after you are also like, the difficulty meter of the GTA game.
Right.
So, right. That's also inspired by that game. That's also why you moved to Miami.
I loved Vice City, and I said I want to live it.
That's it. You're on a warning. That's like your second pun in the space of like 10, 15 minutes. You keep this up, we're not going to invite you back.
What are you going to institute pun control?
I'm watching rocket control, mission control down here, just waiting for them to tell me off, and it's like pull the plug.
You're now at the edge of pun play right now. So
that's it. We've reached the edge of play. And Antonius is enforcing the system. Our executive producers are enforcing the system, and that's it. Now we're going to face the repercussions.
Semi-automatic puns here.
This entire stream has just become very meta all of a sudden. But what about for yourself, Lindsay? What else have you got planned this week? Have you got anything?
I did a PAX panel earlier this week with Chris Ferguson and some other folks around violence in games. That was like 1 a.m. my time, so that was a little brutal, but it was a fun talk.
Oh, how did that go? Because like I was interested in trying to submit something to, because it's like EGX PAX or whatever that I think they're doing this year, and I couldn't find the capacity to do something extra. But yeah, did it go down well?
Yeah, actually it did. We had a really great collection of panelists from all over geographically and in terms of fields. So you had a couple of people who are on the psychology side. I felt a little bit comfortable with them because I'd worked with so many psychometricians at ETS. And then I'd sort of sat on the design side and answered some questions that were a little more game studies oriented. It was a good talk.
Fantastic. And hopefully it was well received as well. So I think you now deserve a break. I think at this point, like maximum digital engagement. What we'll do is we'll wrap up at this point for now. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you continue to have a great week at FDG, and by all means, everyone, please go and check out their work. Absolutely fantastic stuff. But yeah, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch back to myself as we do the production all over again. Thank you very much to both Lindsay and Tom who've turned up as guests for us this evening, as well as, of course, to Jethro and to Mirjam, who have been our correspondents for this evening. So we'll wrap up in a few minutes' time, but I'm going to quickly check back in with my co-host now that he's apparently changed background again during all this.
Like some people change clothes.
I like it. Like I kind of love this kind of existential crisis where you're just trapped inside Windows XP.
And getting increasingly sort of, what's it called? Increasingly unimportant, like feeling that, sort of you're not moving with the times. You just you had your heyday in mid 2000s, and now it's just like, you're just full of bugs.
This is becoming very depressingly real right now.
Yeah, no, I don't.
What's next for yourself anyway? What have you been up to? I haven't seen you in a good 6 months or so anyway, and I realise we haven't really talked about this. Other than just sitting in New York, like, wrestling a pandemic.
Yeah, and that was an interesting game. That was like survival horror. No, it was fine. I mean, I was warm, and inside I had food. Everything was great. we've been doing a lot of work with Model AI. So for those, it's like the plug here, it's like the game AI startup. You're gonna start charging me money now. This is our wee game AI startup, and we've been doing a lot of work trying to sort of build cool products for game developers, and also connected to that, being involved. Frank Lantz has plans to start a new sort of game studio focused on AI, and I've been a little bit involved with that as well. In different ways, but also lots of cool research that we've been doing. I think machine learning. So
the usual. You're just keeping yourself busy as always.
Yeah, machine learning. We were talking before about that PCG is like all over, and everything is procedurally generated. And also we know that everywhere else machine learning is eating the world. I think machine learning is eating PCG as well. That's something. Yeah, that's something that's happening. If I have to point to like what's happening right now, that's what's happening, I think.
I think certainly in the last couple of years we're beginning to see that big shift from symbolic kind of classical approaches, or whatever we actually established early on as these kind of symbolic approaches to procedural generation, into these much more machine learning oriented practices, and like how to really harness existing corpuses of data at scale and then being able to try and apply that in kind of interesting ways. It's an exciting period.
Yes.
And also scary.
An exciting period. Yeah. Like I can.
But that reminds me, I do need to actually message you. Actually, I need to message Christopher about Model AI stuff at another time. But that's me wearing my YouTube hat, so that's a completely separate thing for another time. But yes.
What have you been up to, Tommy?
What have I been up to? So I have been working on, well, first of all, like there's YouTube, everyone knows that. So I had a very busy, I actually went through a phase because, I do consultancy.
Not like a Britney Spears face, like cut off.
Oh, I had a phase where all my hair really grew out. I actually kind of looked like a badger for a bit, and I only managed to shave it all off last month. It's great. There's photos on Twitter if you're curious. But I actually had like consultancy projects that fell through because COVID, budgets, everything fell through, which was a bit nasty. And then what I did was I actually made a bunch of YouTube videos in my downtime, which then ended up being very popular and people watched them, which was great. We did an episode on Facade, which went down very well.
Speaking of breaking the rules on transgression, you made an episode on Facade. The game which was like first like something that everyone in the research world really loved, and then it had a second life as like
like this massive YouTube sensation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really fun, first of all, that video bombed when it came out. Like I think when it came out, like 10,000 people watched it or something, which by my YouTube standards nowadays is bad. Like I can do better than that. And then what happened was it took off. It percolated in the algorithm for a bit, and then it kicked off. And one of the things was all these people who are gamers, lowercase, uppercase, doesn't matter, but also like a lot of people know Facade through Twitch because so many people streamed it. All these, or like actually from Twitch and YouTube, because all these like really popular Let's Players made videos about it. So K-pop and the Gaming Lemon and like PewDiePie and people like that all made these videos about that game. And so people are suddenly going, hang on, this is like a multifaceted AI research project made by two people over a period of like several years. And they were like, all right, I just thought it was like some game that somebody made and whatever. And like, it was really fun to watch people who are completely outside of our sphere watch that video and just be like mind blowing, and really be able to take that on board. I thought that was wonderful. And then I went back to this was an episode we were planning because it's May was the 50th episode of AI in Games. I've been doing this now for so long. I've made 50 videos, and we did Alien Isolation again, because there was I worked with a modder here in the UK, and what we did was we actually cracked open Alien Isolation and we looked at the AI inside it. And so I did a whole episode about that, and that did very well. That's done about 500,000 views or something in the last couple of months, which has been very good.
It's really good. You're like a celebrity, Tommy, right?
I'm the closest thing to a celebrity on YouTube, I think, that this community has, and this is why they wrote me in to do this. And I say closest thing to a celebrity because I don't think I am. Like you and Mike, for example, you're like you're celebrities on Twitter. Me, I've got YouTube, so I'm hoping that I can just connect. That's why I came in and hosted this, because I wanted to make sure this stays my domain.
Right.
All right. Yeah. Speaking of, the whip is being cracked down in the production window.
The people down there in the engine room.
Down in the engine room.
Shuffling coal and stuff to keep the show going.
Yeah, very begrudgingly. They're just like, but I just hurry up and shut up and get this finished because I want to.
You're gonna sort of want better conditions and take over and kill us and stuff.
Yeah, they're honking the goose as well on my end. But so yeah, it's been fantastic to have you on board.
Is the goose in the goose game actually something to do with the workers' revolt and the revolution?
Probably, but this is way beyond my pay grade, if I'm honest. But yeah, Julian, always great to hang out and chat with you. We'll actually need to do some of this outside of the stream because because we haven't spoken to each other the whole conference yet, and it would be good if we maybe caught up after all this. But yeah, I will leave you for now because I need to go and do all the important announcements at the end of the episode. But everybody say goodbye to Julian. He's done a fantastic job. Thank you once again for being with us. And just before he gets another pun in, I'm just going to quickly close that screen on him right now. He's just waving at the camera now. He doesn't quite understand how this works. Anyway, thank you all so much to everybody who's tuned in for the second night of FDG-TV. It's been fantastic to see so many He's blowing kissy faces at me. This is kind of the level of production I'm dealing with. I'm just going to block him with my microphone so I can't see what he's doing. But yeah, it's been a fantastic evening. I'm so happy that so many of you have continued to, check out the show with us, to kind of listen to our guests, listen to our correspondence, and find out more about what's happening at FDG. Oh, thank goodness I think he's mooning the camera. Oh my God. This man is supposed to be like an absolute professional. He has like degrees and like lots of letters after his name, and oh, Jesus Christ, this is what I have to work with. Absolutely horrendous. Anyway, let's wrap up by just quickly talking about some of the things that we can expect to see at FDG-TV tomorrow night. We are going to have, once again, a brand new co-host this time, because Julian's essentially just burned that bridge, I think, in the last 30 seconds. So really excited to have Anne Sullivan, who's an assistant professor in digital new media at Georgia Tech, joining me tomorrow night. That's going to be an absolutely fantastic setup. I'm really looking forward to that. We have Correspondence. We have Raluca Gaina from Queen Mary University of London, who is the chair of the demonstration track, who's going to come in and talk about this year's demonstrations. We have Christoph Salga, who was mentioned earlier, from the University of Hertfordshire here in the UK, who's the organiser of the Generative Design in Minecraft competition, and he's going to be coming and joining me for 5 minutes to talk a little bit about the GDMC competition this year, given the results are going to be announced tomorrow. And we have two wonderful guests. We have Megan Charity from New York University, and we also have Raphael Kim, who is based at Queen Mary University of London as well. We're going to be talking a little bit about their research papers that are being presented here at the conference, and it's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited to sit down and chat with all of them. And so, with that, thank goodness everyone's gone from the other room, so I'm entirely on my own. So this is very much the end of FDG-TV for this evening. Thank you once again to everybody who's turned up, and I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I hope you're continuing to have a great time and you enjoy the rest of the conference and be here with us tomorrow night. And of course, by request, because everyone asked me to do it, I want you all to stay safe, have fun, have a great afternoon or evening, and we'll see you all tomorrow.